Good evening. Welcome to Sense and Sound English. I'm Julian Rivet. Tonight, I'm speaking to you from a quiet executive lounge overlooking the city skyline, the kind of place where important conversations happen softly, where decisions are made over coffee, and where a single sentence can sometimes change the direction of a career. I'm glad you're here. Today, I'd like to talk about something that exists in every company, every industry, and almost every professional relationship: favors. More specifically, favors in the corporate world, hidden currency or dangerous trap. Because not every favor is innocent. Some create trust, some create opportunities, and some create invisible obligations that last much longer than anyone expects. Let me tell you a story. A favor can change a career, not a promotion, not a salary increase, not a major business deal, just a favor, a small one. The kind of favor most people forget 5 minutes later. The interesting thing is that organizations rarely forget, and neither do people. I learned that years ago while observing a situation that seemed completely insignificant at first. The story started with a manager named Daniel. Daniel worked for a large international company. Nothing unusual. He wasn't the CEO. He wasn't a rising star. He wasn't the loudest person in meetings. Actually, many people barely noticed him. But people trusted him. And in business, trust often travels further than talent. One afternoon, Daniel received a message from a colleague. A simple message. "Do you have 5 minutes to look at my presentation?" 5 minutes, that's all. The colleague was preparing for an important client meeting. Daniel was busy, very busy. He had deadlines, reports, calls, a calendar that looked like a battlefield. Still, he replied, "Sure, send it over." That's an expression you'll hear often in English. Send it over. It simply means, send it to me. Natural, common, used every day. The presentation arrived. Daniel reviewed it. He fixed a few slides, adjusted some wording, suggested a better structure. Nothing dramatic. The entire interaction lasted less than 15 minutes. Then life moved on. Or so he thought. Several months later, something unexpected happened. A strategic project appeared. A highly visible project. One that attracted attention from senior leadership. Many managers wanted to participate. Only a few were invited. Daniel was one of them. He was surprised. He had no direct connection to the project, no special expertise, no obvious reason to be there. During the first meeting, he discovered something interesting. The project sponsor was the same colleague he had helped months earlier, the presentation guy, the 5-minute favor. The colleague smiled and said, "I thought of you immediately." That sentence stayed with Daniel. I thought of you. Not because he was the smartest, not because he was the most experienced, because he had been helpful when it mattered. Business people often underestimate memory. They think decisions happen in the moment. Many don't. Many decisions begin years before they become visible. The invitation wasn't payment. It wasn't a transaction. It was something else. Trust. A word you'll hear constantly in business English. Trust. One syllable. Enormous impact. The project went well. Daniel contributed. He met people from other departments, built relationships, learned new skills, expanded his visibility, and all because of a 15-minute conversation he had almost forgotten. Now, this is where the story becomes interesting, because most people hear a story like this and conclude, "Great, I should do more favors." Maybe, maybe not. A few months later, Daniel noticed something. The more people trusted him, the more requests appeared. Someone needed feedback. Someone wanted an introduction. Someone asked for help preparing a proposal. Someone needed support before a difficult meeting. At first, he didn't mind. Helping people felt natural. Then, something changed. The requests became larger, more frequent, more demanding. Some people weren't asking for help. They were collecting obligations. There's a difference, and it's an important one. One day, Daniel met an executive named Marcus. Marcus was charming, connected, well-known across the organization. Everybody seemed to know him. Everybody seemed to like him. Marcus had a fascinating habit. He never asked directly for what he wanted. Never. Instead, he built a network of favors. Small favors, tiny favors, harmless favors, at least on the surface. He would help someone find information, introduce someone to a decision-maker, recommend a supplier, solve a minor problem, nothing dramatic. But he remembered every single one. Years later, he could recall details that others had forgotten. Who he helped, when he helped, why he helped. And eventually, Marcus would call in those favors. That's another useful English expression. To call in a favor. It means to ask someone to return a favor from the past. A very common phrase, especially in professional environments. One afternoon, Daniel witnessed Marcus doing exactly that. A department needed approval for a project. The proposal was weak. The numbers weren't convincing. The risks were obvious. Yet somehow support appeared. People who normally asked difficult questions remained silent. People who usually challenged ideas suddenly became cooperative. Daniel was confused. Later, he discovered something. Marcus had helped many of those people years before. Not illegally, not unethically, just strategically. He had built influence one favor at a time. That's when Daniel began asking himself a difficult question. When does a favor become a debt? And when does a debt become pressure? Most organizations never discuss this openly, yet everyone understands it. The invisible economy of favors exists in almost every workplace. Not because people are dishonest, because people are human. We remember kindness. We remember support. We remember who showed up when we needed help. And we often feel a desire to return that support. In psychology, this is called reciprocity. In business, it often looks like loyalty. Sometimes healthy loyalty, sometimes unhealthy loyalty. The challenge is telling the difference. Years passed. Daniel continued building his career. His reputation grew. His network expanded. Senior leaders knew his name. Then a major opportunity appeared. A director position became available. An important promotion. The company identified two finalists, Emily and Robert. Emily was exceptional. Strong results, strong leadership, strong communication. Many people believed she was the obvious choice. Robert was competent, respected, reliable. But his performance wasn't as strong, at least not on paper. The decision committee met. Daniel was part of the process. As discussions began, something interesting happened. The conversation wasn't only about performance. It wasn't only about results. Stories appeared, memories appeared, examples appeared. People said things like, "Robert helped us during a difficult transition. He stepped in when nobody else would. I know I can count on him." That's another common expression. I can count on him, meaning I can trust him. Notice how often trust returns to the center of business decisions. Not spreadsheets, not reports. Trust. Eventually, Daniel realized something. The committee wasn't choosing between competence and relationships. They were trying to evaluate both. Because organizations run on both. Performance matters. Relationships matter. Results matter. Trust matters. And sometimes the most difficult decisions happen when those factors point in different directions. The discussion lasted hours, longer than anyone expected. At the end, Emily received the promotion. The decision was fair. The decision was justified. But Daniel left the room thinking about something else. Robert had come surprisingly close, closer than the numbers suggested, closer than the reports suggested, closer than many expected. Why? Because years of goodwill had weight. Not enough to overcome performance, but enough to influence the conversation, enough to shape perceptions, enough to matter. That realization stayed with him, and honestly, it stayed with me too, because many professionals focus exclusively on skills. Others focus exclusively on relationships. The strongest careers usually combine both. The reality is simple. A favor can be generosity. A favor can be leadership. A favor can be trust. A favor can also become leverage. The difference often depends on intention. Why was the favor given? Why is it being remembered? Why is it being requested again? Those questions matter more than the favor itself. And perhaps that's the hidden lesson. Most people believe power comes from titles, from authority, from organizational charts. Sometimes it does, but some of the strongest forms of influence are built quietly. One conversation, one introduction, one moment of support, one favor at a time. The real danger isn't doing favors. The real danger is forgetting that favors create relationships. And relationships have consequences. Sometimes good, sometimes complicated, always human. Years after that first presentation review, Daniel barely remembered the slides. He barely remembered the corrections. He barely remembered the meeting. But he remembered what happened afterward. Because the presentation was never the important part. The relationship was. And that's true in more careers than people realize. Sometimes the most valuable currency inside an organization never appears on a balance sheet. It moves silently. It travels through memory. It grows through trust. And it often changes decisions long before anyone notices. Because in business, favors are rarely about the moment they happen. They are about the doors they quietly open years later. Thank you for spending these moments with me. I hope you enjoyed today's story and picked up a few useful expressions along the way. Here at Sense and Sound English, we don't learn English through textbooks. We learn through people, through decisions, through mistakes, through stories that reveal how the world really works. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd be delighted to have you join me again. There will always be another story waiting, another decision to examine, another lesson hidden between the lines. Until next time, take care of yourself, keep listening, keep learning, and never underestimate the value of a conversation. I'm Julian Rivet. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again in our next story.